I know who we're talking to. I think the live studio audience knows who's coming up as well. Tracy, I would like to introduce you to Juan in Dallas, Texas. Juan, you are live with Eric and Tracy. How are you doing today?
Hello.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, so what did you want to talk about today?
Nothing. You guys asked me to call back, and I said I would, and I want to stick to my word.
Oh,
I wouldn't be
All right. Well, thanks for calling.
So Juan had a couple of statements that really kind of intrigued us. From what I remember, you were saying that magic is real, that Big Pharma has wizards in it, and that Hollywood casts magic spells, and you can tell that because of the root of the words in holly and wood, right?
You can tell that because of the effect that it has on people.
You can tell what?
It has on the. What do you mean? What are you asking?
You said you can tell that. You can tell that there's magic, or you can tell that it exists, like Hollywood as a place exists.
Well, you can tell that there's magic.
How are you defining magic?
Hollywood. Magic can be used.
No, what is it?
It's a. There's different forms of magic. It can be a pharmaceutical. Like think about a cartoon, an old witch cartoon back in the day. She would have a pot. She would be like in the woods, and she would be throwing things in a pot, and the pot will start smoking, and she'll take a vial and give it to someone, and they'll give that to someone that they're putting a spell on.
Okay, but do you think that
So you're saying magic is pharmacology?
I'm saying that the witch put off the gown and put on a lab coat.
Okay, so basically you're saying that, I don't, at least I understand now what you're calling magic, right? So if I give somebody a chemical or some substance that affects their thinking or their physiology in some way, that's how you're defining magic.
Magic is a general term for an influence put on someone without them knowing, I believe.
But I do know, for example, when I take a Tylenol, that it's going to influence me to have my headache go away, right? It's going to influence me by making the headache stop, right?
But you think that you think. See, they're understanding that it's the Tylenol and not the spell. It is like you but you don't know that it's a form of magic. You know what I'm saying?
So are you?
No, I don't understand. I guess what I'm wondering then is, what is the point of taking the chemical, and why is it that whenever I take the chemical, the headache goes away?
It's a form of witchcraft. That's what it is.
I still get that you're calling pharmacology. You're just substituting witchcraft for pharmacology.
Do you put any supernatural elements in this? Like, is this something that is well within the world that we understand, or are you trying to say that there's something not understood, some kind of supernatural element? When you talk about a spell, we're talking about something that in English has meaning. And so if you're going to use that term in a way that none of us have. I don't think it does have
meaning, right? It's like somebody says something and then somehow there's something happens, and then somehow it was tied to it happening even though there's no explanation for how it was tied to that happening. I don't understand that at all. And even though we have the word in English, it doesn't really mean anything coherent, because what I just described is incoherent.
But we have naturalist explanations for things. So like let's say,
yeah, that
the way
I understand. I'm
magic,
made of chemicals. Right? You give me a chemical, my chemicals change, and that causes a change because the chemistry has changed. And so I get that.
Therein is not magic. That's not, there are no, there's nowhere along that process where we say, I am going to do magic, whatever magic would be. And so what I'm saying is the word magic carries with it a lot of baggage that we use that would not be applicable in the situation.
Right, but part of that baggage is simply accepting that the term has meaning even though it really doesn't, right? And so what I'm trying to say is then what is magic?
Well, would you say that pain is physical or spiritual?
What is spiritual?
Yeah, that I can't say it's spiritual because I don't know what spiritual even means. That's another one I'd have to say, what are you defining as spiritual?
I mean, you can feel pain, and it's not something that you can really see.
Yeah, you can.
You know, I mean, or measure.
Yeah, you
Well,
can.
you can measure pain.
I wouldn't say that, because the one person a tattoo might feel, you know, a certain type of way, and another person, you know, it might feel a certain type of way. So
Yeah, how
it's
people
not really-
process it, like from a subjective standpoint, may have differences. So for example, and in fact, culturally, we do process pain differently. There are some cultures that process pain in different ways than our culture processes pain in general. And within the culture, there's going to be people that process pain differently, people with different thresholds for certain types. But you can still go into someone's brain and see that certain parts of it are excited or not excited, reacting or not reacting, and know that a person is experiencing, you know, nerve reactions that would be associated with pain.
You can travel the signal up your central nervous system to the brain and back. I mean, we are hardwired in that way. So you're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater there.
But it's irrelevant. I still don't know what spiritual means.
What?
Yeah, I mean, I'm here.
So
It's something. In my personal, not in my personal opinion, but the spiritual world is more realistic than the physical world.
okay,
I still don't know what
Yeah.
spiritual means.
And if you can't even tell us what spiritual is, and you're making a claim about it, that means nothing to us. You need to actually
I can't have a
identify it.
conversation that I don't understand the terms and how they're being used.
Okay, so what's the question? Do you want me to answer?
Well, we were first asking about magic, and then you used spiritual
Spiritual?
to help explain magic, and now I had to backtrack it one step further back and say, what is
magic is
spiritual?
magic is spiritually understood.
Okay, so what
Which
is
then
spiritual
backs
then?
us up one more step. Okay, so now we need to come up with a definition for spiritual because I don't know what that means.
Spiritual is really hard to give a definition to someone who doesn't believe that it exists.
Well, how could I don't know if I believe it or not because I don't know how you're using the term. I don't know what it is. I'd have to know what it is first before I could make a decision about whether or not I agree
Yeah.
it exists.
And can we do that in other parts of the world? Man, can we do that in other parts of our lives? Oh, you know, you don't know a car exists, you know, and because you don't own a car, or you know, you can see things in everyday life, right? I don't need to convince you that books are a thing because I can just show you a book.
But the thing is,
Right?
people use different definitions for spiritual. And if somebody defines it in a way, there are some people that define it in a way that for me it just means social, like a social creature or engaging in social activity. And in that case, I would say I don't call it that spiritual, but I understand what they're describing and I do agree that it exists. And so for you, when you're using the term spiritual, I'm asking you, how are you defining that term?
What she said.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to explain. The words fail me. You know what I mean, to explain what's spiritual.
So if you were going to ask me if I believed it existed or not, what is it that you're asking me if I believe it exists or not when you say, do you believe in spiritual things?
Well, I would start by saying, do you feel things that's around you? Do you feel things, or do you just?
Of course I feel things.
means
Yeah, and if we're saying that
mean,
spiritual means feelings, or either emotional or physical, I would say correct. Yeah, I agree that exists. People feel things, for sure.
I would say the emotional is a spiritual aspect. Yeah. You could say that it's almost emotional, but a little bit deeper than that. But we'll stick with emotional.
Okay, yes, I agree that people have emotions and that they have emotional experiences.
Okay, what do you think emotions are? Like when it comes down to not what do you think, how do you define emotions when it comes to not the chemical aspect of it?
When it comes to
think that
not the
someone has
chemical
really
aspect of it. I mean, if you're asking me subjectively what the experience is, you know, like how I process emotions when that chemistry is happening, I guess that would be, I don't know if that's what you're asking or not, but for example, for me, as somebody that studied interpersonal communication, I would say that an emotion is feedback from your brain in response to a perceived stimulus, which may or may not be appropriate to the situation. So for example, if I believe, like I give the example a lot of times of a dark alley. So you're going down a dark alley, you're taking a shortcut, and as you're heading toward trying to go to your car, you start heading toward a dumpster and you see a crouching shadow behind the dumpster and you start to become afraid, right? So your brain basically says, there's a person crouching or something crouching behind that dumpster and you're in a dark, pinned in alleyway and you have to go past that thing to exit. And now I'm thinking maybe it wasn't such a good idea to take the shortcut through the alleyway to get to the parking lot. And I'm so scared, but I'm walking and I'm telling myself, like, this isn't what I'm seeing. Maybe should I go back? Should I, I'm getting, and the fear and the anxiety, the adrenaline is starting to pump, like all those chemicals that go into causing my brain to start to prepare for fight or flight or freeze. And I get closer to it and I realize it's just a garbage bag that someone set next to the dumpster and it's blowing around in the wind because it's not completely closed. And then I feel relief. And I'm like, okay, now my brain is processing a whole other scenario. So what I thought I was reacting to wasn't what I was reacting to, which demonstrates emotions can be wrong, right? My emotional feedback is a reaction to what I perceive is going on. And if my perception is wrong, my emotional feedback will be inconsistent with the actual situation. And so from a communication standpoint, which is part of what my studies included, this would be the intrapersonal model of what emotional feedback represents. It's a communication with the self in an attempt to prepare you for a situation that you believe that you're in, whether you're actually in that situation or not. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
How do you explain intuition?
Intuition is when you have experience with a particular scenario to the point that you start to develop concepts about it. So and that can be wrong as well, right? So for example, let's say that I come from an abusive background where I've undergone like all kinds of abusive things and my father cheated on my mom and beat her. And so I start dating somebody and he gets angry and he raises his voice and I intuitively feel like he's going to hit me. But he doesn't. My intuition is to prepare because I recognize the raising of the voice and the anxiousness that's happening as leading up to violence because that's what I'm used to. Now, it's also could be the case that I'm correct, that the person is going to hit me and that I am seeing the pattern in this person that I recognized from the past. Now, there's also things that people would call, like, for example, instincts, right? So, I mean, we do have an instinctive reaction, like that fight, flight, freeze. I don't know how much of that is taught or comes with the package, you know what I mean? Yeah. When you're born, I do think that there are some things that are human, innately human, that kind of come with that as part of our biology, and that then our experiences sort of go into molding that, would be my thinking. And again, I have to ask, does that make sense?
And
makes sense.
And I think underpinning that is that biological aspect is if we were to lobotomize Tracy, other than the world being a much sadder place, you could remove her ability to access that memory, and so that intuition would not be there. We have a lot of examples of people who've had brain injuries, and those same things aren't there anymore. And also on top of that, there are chemical interactions that directly impact that. I've talked about on the show having depression. You
bring up a good point in that there are people who, for example, are experiencing trauma, right? Mm-hmm. Like they'll have a post-traumatic stress disorder, they'll have reactions to particular stressful triggers. And so you have ways to treat those people so that they don't have an intuitive reaction. They hear a bang and they don't first think it's a gun.
Get under the table, yeah.
Right, so there are ways that you can adjust your intuition and adjust your reactions. Like a person, for example, who might be fearful of an attack could go and take self-defense courses and what do they call that? Or like martial arts, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
And you could become more comfortable with the idea of getting into like a physical confrontation with somebody and not be so fearful. So you can alter those things by going in and just simply practicing particular techniques to change them.
And not just that, but there are pharmacological things. I was going to say I fight. It's something that I'm open about, and I'm happy to talk about it, but I am medicated for my depression, and that helps, right? And so you have something that truly does directly affect my emotional ability to operate in the world. So when you ask about what is not chemical, well, we're talking about biology and we're talking about chemicals, and we're still saying that these are important things that are true and real and have impacts in our lives. But none of those things that we just described, there's no extra element. So if you're trying to isolate an extra element, what we're saying is this is what we've got, but we don't have that extra that I think you're asking about. Is that what you were trying to get at? Is there's something more to it?
Yeah, that is what I was trying to ask. And you guys actually explained that in a scientific way awesome. So that's not much I can really say.
Oh, thank
That's
you.
cool.
Yeah, that makes me feel good. Thank you, Juan.
Take that, people in the comments who said that we shouldn't. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today before we moved on to the next caller?
There is not.
No.
Well, I'm really glad you called today, Juan. This is my first interaction with Juan, and I think it was very positive. So
Right.
Thank you for calling.
Definitely, when you're looking at things, what we described, what we were talking about, we weren't just taking it that there was something additional. We were looking at and observing what we know and going up until that point. When you hit a place where you say, I don't know, the best thing you can do is say, I don't know, because you're giving yourself permission to explore and learn and find out. And if you say, oh, I'm going to fill in the gap with magic, miracles, spells, or whatever, you are greatly limiting your ability to get to a conclusion.
You know what? I actually tried to continue off the point of last week, but it's very difficult when we're on in that train of mind or conversation. So it didn't work out too perfectly, and it's not really something that can be explained so easily. You know what I mean? So I guess you guys' explanation, how you explained the things, are pretty awesome. So.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. And we encourage you to take that. We've talked about epistemology. I talked to you about epistemology briefly last week. And it is your toolbox for deciphering the world around you. And I encourage you to do that in other parts of your life, because you will find that the world is not less amazing. We live in an incredible world. And the more we learn about it, the more we can ask other questions and grow.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people think I'm playing a semantic game when I say things like, can you explain this? Or what do you mean by this? Mm-hmm. But I think what happens is that a lot of times we get very comfortable with words that really don't have meaning, that we're just used to them, and we've been told they mean
no,
things.
I wouldn't really say they don't have meaning, and I don't know if that was referring to me or not.
No. What I'm saying is that when you have I'm tying it into what Eric is talking about, right? So, for example, when someone says this is done by magic, well, magic is sort of a catch-all term for it's done in a way we don't understand. I don't understand how this could cause this, and therefore it's magic. And so what Eric is describing is that when you plug in a word like that, it literally stops you from looking for an answer, because you're basically saying there is no answer, it's a magic thing. Mm-hmm. And there isn't an explanation, because magic, if we could explain it, wouldn't be magic. So what we're basically saying when we use a word like magic is that thing, I don't know what it is or how it works or how that would be possible, and so there's no explanation. And then it just moves into okay, can't explain that. What's the next thing? Instead of saying, well, how do we explain it, or can we explain it? And let's look for an answer, instead of just saying it's unanswerable and then just putting it aside and never looking at it again.
Exactly. If it helps to make it a little more impersonal, if you're worried about this as just something that you're identifying. We had a person that called in last week and said, oh, I have a definition of miracles. And what they were doing is they were trying to redefine the word miracles to mean things that they see in the everyday world. But the reason we don't do that is because you are propping up the idea that most people have with miracles, and that is that it is some kind of supernatural influence by an intercessory, deity. And so by doing that, you're continuing to make it a safe umbrella for people to not take their kids to the doctor. I mean, there are real world effects to us propping up different ideas, and the idea of miracles in that situation is a dangerous one, right?
I wouldn't say that. Because,
No.
Because today, with today's pharmaceutical industry, there's always side effects of everything that's taken. So, you can go to the hospital with one, you can go to the pub with one ailment and leave with several other. So I would recommend prayer instead of, or not really prayer, but following the commandments, because sin is the cause to a lot of ailments nowadays. But
No.
And let's save that one for next time. That could be the next
nice
call.
can of worms that you just opened.
Sickness. Yeah, let's. That could be a whole other hour.
Juan, I hope you enjoyed your call, and we'll definitely hop into that. But I very much disagree, and we can always talk later about it. Okay, buddy?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Take care, brother.
You guys have a good Sunday.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks a lot.
I think my first question would be something like infant illnesses, born with an illness, born with a defect.
I keep bringing up the same article, but it keeps popping into my mind as.
But there's original sin, and that could be where he's headed with it.
I don't care. Babies die. Babies die. People see their children suffer.
Some people would have an issue, with saying that, because he's talking about following the commandments. And so my assumption was that he's talking about behaviors, like sinful behaviors that result in illness. Because otherwise, you wouldn't expect someone who was just born to be following commandments, right? So when he was kind of segued into that was kind of where I went. And then I thought, but there's the original sin doctrine, and then the person would be kind of backtracking it into that. But the reason I didn't go to original sin immediately was because he was talking about leading a particular life that would result in sin, resulting in illness. So
that makes more sense.
That's why my question would be, how do you explain infant illness?
Well, I'm thinking back. I'm thinking back through the commandments, and I'm like, okay, I am the Lord thy God. That really doesn't have to do with being sick. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. There's no, wash your ass commandment. Like that would help. There are no commandments against general cleanliness or against. It just doesn't fit that way, but we'll get there. We're talking about him off air, and I'd rather.
Yeah, but he can hear that. They help him brainstorm for next week or whenever.